Welcome to In the Game Room, episode number 3. I'm Alan, and this is...
Chris.
Hi, Chris.
Hello.
So before we get right into the conversation here, I want to introduce him. We know who he is now. We met about a little less than a year ago, right?
Yeah.
In June or something like that.
Yeah.
He's a customer of mine and wrote me an email and said, hey, I want to come out and see your shop. And I thought, oh my God, this is weird. I run an online business. I don't have an office. I don't have a showroom. I don't have a store. Now this guy wants to come out, and it was just
Which was almost exactly the email I received.
Yeah, that was
This is weird.
yeah, pretty much what I said. And he said, no, it's cool. I just want to see the shop and everything. And finally, I got over my social anxiety and said, come on out. And we've been friends ever since. So it's worked out great. A couple of weeks later or a month later, whenever it was, you had business travel, and you ended up coming out and seeing me at Gen Con for a day.
I did.
And that was really cool, and we've been kind of hanging out ever since.
That was my first experience at a convention of that type.
It was my first experience at a convention of that type, too. Nothing ever that big. It was amazing. So it's been cool. You've been out here 4 or 5 times or something, and we're getting into gaming together and stuff like that. So I thought I'd bring you in and join in on this. You're a little more of a beginner, novice, newer gamer anyways,
Absolutely.
right?
Absolutely, yes.
So what did you start with?
So in high school, it was the junior high school was Dungeons and Dragons, and then some role-playing games that were coming out in fad at that time, and then really just stopped almost completely. Almost until maybe that year ago when my son had expressed an interest in miniatures gaming. A friend of his has been getting into it, and he wanted to get into the Robotech series, which was great for me because I grew up in that era. Robotech was definitely a cartoon I watched when I was a child, and so I thought, oh, this would be a lot of fun.
Was it?
It was a blast for the 5 days that it lasted. Because then one of his best friends got into Flames of War.
Right.
And in between that, when we started getting into Robotech is when I started getting in touch with you and trying to figure out what I was going to invest in, and purchased a sizable amount of stuff because, I want to play with my son and have that connection with him and give him some memories. And then when he decided to get into Flames of War was when I was really starting to touch base with you because of your military gaming background. And now it's turned into probably twice as much of Flames of War stuff than I had of Robotech stuff.
So you made the initial investment, and now you get to do it again,
Right.
in twice the scale.
Correct.
And twice as much stuff. And Flames of War stuff is not cheap. It's
No.
not terribly expensive.
It's not terribly expensive.
But it's not cheap either.
And the Robotech stuff wasn't, the initial investment was, more than I thought it should be. However, there's that nostalgic to it. So, even or nostalgia to it. Even with that, now it's up on my shelf in my home office, and, it looks really neat, and it's, it's kind of fun to look at, and
Yeah,
I painted
right.
the figures and got really familiar with painting miniatures at that point, which, obviously led to
This stuff here. Yeah.
this stuff here, yeah.
It sounds like my Star Wars X-Wing collection. I've got all the ships. Never played the game once in my life. But
I have that too, and I haven't played it yet.
It looks really cool up on the shelf.
That's
I love
right.
it. So, but whatever, it's all fun. So now you're getting into the Flames of War thing.
I am.
Your son, and that's really cool.
Yeah, it's I find it's easier. The Robotech. Not to say that the Robotech rules are difficult, but we're talking about a 10-year-old kid, and so when there are many different rules for many different things that you can do, and many different types of vehicles with many different weapons, it's a lot to remember, and it's hard to focus on having fun in the game.
Right.
And when you're trying to teach a strategy, you're trying to teach, well, no, that cannon can't do that, or this missile can't do that, and
Right.
it was really confusing. And so when he got into the Flames of War stuff, I went online and looked at their simplified rules, and I thought this is going to be perfect for his age. And as he grows older, we'll get into more of the rules with Flames of War and other gaming systems.
Well, it's got to be fun, and it's got to keep moving. If you're going
Right.
to keep, if you're going to keep a young kid interested,
Right.
you saw how long he was interested in Robotech,
Yeah.
and then he moved on.
It's very short, yes.
So keep it interesting, keep it fun. So you're getting into painting,
I am.
and that's something new for you too, right?
Very, very new. Back in my D&D days, it was, 6 different colors of testers and not knowing thinning or brush techniques and watering down, all of the things that it takes. And I still actually have some of those miniatures, and I took one of my Flames of War miniatures and set it next to one of the old D&D characters that I had.
Right.
And it was just such a big difference between the two, and I just kind of giggle about it as like, this is where I started, and 25, 30 years later, it took me 25 or 30 years to get here, but this is where I'm at.
It's fun to look at the old stuff.
It is.
I look at some of my old stuff, especially like Micro Armor, and I'm amazed at what I could do as a kid, because my eyes were sharp,
Right.
my hands were steady, and now I look and go, well, I wish I could do that now. You'd think with 30 years experience I'd be better, but there's some places where I was
Right.
I was better back then. It's kind of funny.
And you could do it for longer. This position gets old in
No,
40.
yeah, about 5 minutes. So you've gotten into painting,
I did.
blackwashing, airbrushing, all this
Yes.
stuff's kind of new to you, and you're doing an awesome job. It
Well,
really
thank
looks
you.
good.
Thank
The people at home, the viewers,
you. Right.
probably won't be able to see this very well, but I'll post some pictures in here. But the camouflage job you did is awesome. The blackwashing, the figures on the base are really, really cool. I like the basing. Oops, I'm gonna destroy your shit here.
That's okay.
I don't know if you guys can see this or not, but he's done some basing with the gravel on the ground and then the little gamer's grass turf here. Really looks really cool.
I think
It's too bad they're Germans; they'll have to die. But
they do have to die.
They do.
But I have my airborne crew in here,
Okay.
so we're.
you need targets. That's what I
Yes,
always say about
absolutely.
my 285th scale Soviet stuff. You gotta have targets.
Gotta have something to shoot at, otherwise it's not a game.
Exactly.
So yeah, it's been a blast. It's definitely been a learning curve. I can tell which tank I started on and which one I finished on.
Right.
And then I knew that getting into these little miniatures was going to be, the tanks is one thing. There's not a ton of detail on them, whereas like painting the faces and
Yeah.
and all of the little things that are backpacks and satchels and stuff that are on these guys. So I knew that I should start with something big and develop a stroke and a method on how to paint them and what I want them to look like. Because I went online and there's got to be 100 different paint jobs just that I could find
Right.
for this one tank out of the exact same set that I bought.
Right.
So I needed to figure out what would look best, what I thought would look neat, and was at a level that I could do it rather than taking on some 25 or 30 step process to paint this one, in times 15 tanks.
Right.
And so it was really something that I had to hone in, and obviously some advice from you. I do bug you a lot. Lots of emails, lots of texts, lots of phone calls.
It's all good.
So then when I got into the miniatures, the figures, and it was one of the things that you told me as I was asking about different paints, and we were looking at a paint that was designed especially for, or specifically for air.
Right.
And I said, can you use that product on like a base rather than just using it in an airbrush?
Right.
Can you use it outside? And he goes, yes, you said yes, but you just have to add more layers.
Right.
And so I took that philosophy and I really watered down my colors and slowly just added more and more
Build them
as
up.
I was going. I've seen some of these guys where people actually put the whites in their eyes, and I'm sorry,
Yeah,
I don't
it's
have that. That's just not in me anymore.
Not happening. Not in this scale, anyways. You get
yeah.
into 25 millimeter, 28 millimeter. You can kind of play around with that kind of stuff.
This is it.
Yeah.
I'm not. I'm actually looking at this and going, this is going to be fun with my son, but getting into your TAC 2 stuff is probably better for me because it's more compact
Right.
and something that I can play with you.
Right.
You know.
Cool. Well, that kind of brings me to the next thing I was going to ask you about, and that is the last time you were here, we played a super quick. It was like
Yeah.
less than 2 turns. I think it was a
Yeah,
turn
it
and a
was.
half, just one vehicle versus one vehicle until one of us died. And
Me.
And it was you, of course, because I had the M1.
That's true.
I was the good guys. But I wanted to ask you, like, what was your first initial impression of the most basic aspect of that game?
My first initial impression was I'm gonna have to learn a whole new game, and Alan wants to play this while I'm up here, and so I thought it was going to take a lot more time than it did. And I think my initial impression was, of course, I love wargaming. This looks fun, and it's just neat. But I thought, God, I'm gonna have to learn another system and try not to confuse all the other things that I have learned with this. But with the card system that you have, we were playing within 5 minutes.
Yeah.
I mean, and I knew the simplified rules, and I had a really good time doing it. Just looking at how, what hits what and how it hits and how much damage it does and
Right.
did it bounce. I mean, it was really simple and easy to learn. I know there's a lot more to it. There can be if you want to, but I think for me is, if I would have probably spent more time, if I'd known you a year earlier, I probably would have tried to get my son to get into
this.
6mm gaming,
Right.
because it can be simple, and then you also explained to me at that time that you can really add more nuance to the game, as you get more and more experience with it.
It's my dog. He's being a pest. Yeah, that's what I like about it, is exactly what you're saying. You can make it really simple. And when I go to conventions and stuff, I want to play games that are fun, and we play games that are fun. We don't use a lot of the optional rules. Don't use any infantry. Don't use any what do you call it? The morale and things like that. Suppression. We just go tank on tank and just have a fight. And a 5 or 6 turn game will last a couple hours. Everybody's had a great time, and you walk away happy.
Right.
But if I had more time, and if I was going to set up a game here that we were going to play like maybe over a period of weeks, on several visits, we could really get into playing morale and suppression and artillery and air support and all kinds of these other things that are optional. Or we can just sit down and have a 15, 20-minute game that's 1 or 2 turns and just fire some lead at each other and have a good time.
And it was very, I just thought, like, it couldn't be an easier system. I mean, even looking at the basics of the Flames of War, there are a lot more simplified rules than you had in your system.
Right.
And it was fun to play. It really was.
So I'm going to be bringing this game, my cards and my rule books and things like that, to a couple of conventions. I was going to mention at the end of this video, I might as well mention it now because we're talking about it. There's a convention coming up in Los Angeles in February, the 12th to the 15th. It is Orcon, put on by strategicon.net, and I'll be running some demo games there. I'll be in the dealer room with an actual dealer table, and I'm going to devote about half of it just to running some demo games on this. So if anybody is in the LA area and wants to come by and learn how to play 6mm modern micro armor, TAC-2, they can just sit down at my table and we'll run a little game. So that'll be kind of fun.
Which I was going to ask you, because I don't know that we've talked about it too much, is like, how did you get into this, and how was TAC-2 like developed and put into your life?
It's a long story.
Well,
Yeah.
just exactly like you. When I was in high school, or maybe even late junior high, started playing Dungeons and Dragons. And from there, I went on to another role-playing game, science fiction game called Traveler, which was kind of fun, which is still around actually, and also Dungeons and Dragons is, of course. And then a friend of mine had a sand table in his backyard. If you don't know what a sand table is, picture a ping pong table with wood around the edge about 3 or 4 inches high, and throw on a bunch of sand and make some mountains and stuff, and that's a sand table. And he had one of those on his back porch, and he had a bunch of World War II micro armor and a set of rules called Tractics, Tractics or something like that. It was a World War II game. And I played that with him a couple of times. I didn't know the rules, I didn't know the vehicles, I didn't know the weapons, I got my ass kicked every time, but it was really fun. And I liked the tanks. So I started going to the hobby shop and buying tanks. I bought a few of the World War II vehicles, and then I started seeing the M60s and the M1 the M1 tanks and the M113s and all the cool modern stuff that I was really into. And then all of a sudden, something on the shelf appeared in 1980, and it was called TAC Force. It's a brand new game, and it was modern micro armor gaming. And I was like, yeah, I got to try this. So I bought the game, and then I was all in. I never played World War II again after that. Sorry, all you World War II fans, but I was over it. I was moving on to the modern stuff. And I played that for a couple of years, went to conventions around LA and Anaheim, and had some game boards, not quite as elaborate as these because I was a kid, but I did have some boards and brought them to games, to conventions, and played big ass tournaments. We had, like this whole board, this whole table filled with boards, had like 6 players on each side. It was really amazing back then. There was a lot of people that were into it, and it was really fun. And we'd play all night games, and had a blast. And then I went off and joined the Army so I could play war games in full scale for a little while. But I brought all my stuff with me, and I met some people, and we started playing war games there. And we ran into a little issue in that TAC Force was published in 1980, and the latest, greatest vehicle in there was the M60A3, which was the latest, greatest vehicle at the time, of course. There was a card in there for something that they called XM1, which was the experimental version of what would eventually become the Abrams. But it really wasn't much different than the M60A3. And that's where it kind of cut off, because that's when the rules were published and that's what existed. And the other problem with TAC Force was that it was just US and Soviet. There were no West Germans, there were no French, no British, none of the other countries that you might want to play with. And the vehicles existed, the miniatures existed, but the cards in the game did not exist. So that's when I started making my own cards. Or actually, at the time, it was just spreadsheets. I was making spreadsheets before computers. It was an actual physical spreadsheet, a piece of paper with lines on it. And I started writing in the data for all these other vehicles so that I could use them.
Just using what you knew from the game.
Exactly. And that's where TAC 2 was born. While I was in the Army, probably 1984, I started working on collecting data for new vehicles and vehicles from other countries. And it grew and it grew and it grew. And then just a few years ago, I decided that I had all of this data, just piles of data that I've been working on for so long. I thought I got to put this into some kind of form that can be used. And that's when I started doing the new cards for the game.
So the cards are your invention?
The cards, the original game had cards,
Oh, okay.
just like these.
Okay.
I'm pointing over there to something you can't see.
Sorry.
But there's cards over there. It had cards, and that was the coolest thing about the game. It was so easy the way the cards overlapped and you found your numbers. So I just started adding to that and remaking the cards. And the one big change I made on the cards was, instead of everything being in inches, I converted everything to full-scale meters. So technically this game can be played in any scale, as long as you have some sort of ruler or tape measure that's marked off in meters for that scale.
Gotcha.
I think you should play in 6mm, but that's just me. But you can play in 15mm, 20. You're just going to need a much bigger table. So I started releasing the cards, and then I realized a lot of people don't have access to the rules because they've been out of print for 36 years now. And so I contacted GHQ, who was a partner in publishing these rules, and said, I want to re-release the rules, rewritten, modernized, and release them for free to anybody that wants them. I don't want to make any money off it or anything, so I just want to give them away. And they said, yeah, whatever, we're done with it. We finished with it, 36 years ago. Do whatever you want. So I did a complete rewrite from cover to cover of the rules. They're the same basic rules, same system, but again, changing everything to meters instead of inches, and then adding a few things for the more modern weapon systems and things like that. And that brings us right up to where we are today. I have everything online at tac2game.com. You can download everything for free and start playing, and that's my gaming history. Now, a lot of people, when I go to conventions and stuff, they know I'm in the business, or they come to my booth, and they want to talk to me about a lot of different games. This is kind of my dirty little secret. in the gaming world, I know, well, I used to know Dungeons and Dragons. I used to know Traveler. I've forgotten everything I know about them. And I know TAC 2, or TAC Force.
Right.
That's pretty much it. When it comes to gaming, you know more games than I do. And most people know more games than I do. I have the game that I play, and that's pretty much it. And that's just the way it is. I don't apologize for it. I wish I knew more. I need to know more about the different games. I own a lot of games.
Well, but to your defense, I mean, I don't think you should feel bad about that. When we were at the convention, it was all you did was look at what new games were coming out,
Right.
and you talked to the people at the booths and to figure out what they were doing and you know how you could complement that gaming system with what you do.
Right.
So I mean, yeah, you don't know the rules, but you know what's going on out there.
I know what's out
You've
there.
got your finger on the pulse. You may not, you know,
As much as I
in it,
can.
but
There's new games coming out every day, and I can't keep up. But yeah, I try. That's why I go to some of these bigger conventions like Gen Con. And I want to see what's out there. I want to see what people are playing. I want to see what they need. I'm not necessarily going to buy the game and play it. I might buy it for other reasons. I might need to know information out of it. You know, like I bought Flames of War years ago so I could find out the base sizes. I needed to know that so that I could make bases, you know, things like that. I don't have any intention of playing it. I have nothing against it. It's probably an amazing game, but I don't have the time or the energy or whatever to.
when you've got your game.
I got my game.
Yeah, I mean,
It's quite literally.
There
my
were
game.
other games out there when D&D was out there, but I played D&D. I mean, it's,
Right.
you know, it's not your game.
So that's my sort of history in the gaming, and brings us to where we are today, just playing TAC 2 all the time.
So, how did you get into this? Like, I mean, you talk about you played it, but I mean, I played D&D and I never wrote my own D&D modules. You know, how do you get into doing what you do?
The business side of it.
Right.
That's another long story. Good thing I've got a lot of wind in me, huh?
A lot of tape.
Yeah, there's plenty. It's a big compact disc card. So after I got out of the Army, I got a job as a model maker. And pretty much ever since then, I've had a couple little odd businesses and odd jobs in between, but pretty much for the last 30-something years, I've been a model maker, and it's all I've ever done. And so I've always loved building things. And when I had my shop, I had a big commercial model shop, and we did work for Boeing and Raytheon and companies like that. We did everything from tiny little display models up to full-scale mock-ups of satellites, things like that. But always next to me, there was a shelf behind my workbench. I had this little plastic display case that I bought when I was a teenager at the hobby store. And in it were pieces of micro armor that I had either built from scratch or modified. And it was always next to me, because it was always in the back of my mind that somehow, someday, I wanted to work that into a business.
Right.
And I never quite exactly knew how. And then about 10 years ago, sold my business to my business partner, and took a couple of years to kind of figure out what I wanted to do. I used to say I was like semi-retired for a little while, just kind of goofing around. And took a job at a aerospace company in Las Vegas, because they needed somebody to run their model shop. And I thought, well, I'll just go out there and
And the same kind of thing you were doing before.
running a commercial model shop for an aerospace company. They needed somebody to come in and kind of straighten out their shop because it was a bit of a mess. They didn't have any management in the shop, so they hired me to come out there and run their shop. And I was in Las Vegas for a year, and staying out there during the week and coming home on the weekends. And I thought, well, I can either go down to the Strip and blow all my money every night,
Right.
or I can do something constructive with my goddamn time and make something of my life. So I started Gamecraft Miniatures. I started literally in a rented bedroom in Las Vegas with a couple of resin cast buildings in 285th scale, and I put up a website and started selling.
And it was Gamecraft Miniatures.
Gamecraft Miniatures from day one, yeah.
Wow.
And because I wanted to play Micro Armor again, and there weren't a lot of buildings and structures and scenery items available that met my taste.
Right.
So I thought, if I'm going to play, I want to have some cool scenery.
So this was for you. And you just also could possibly turn it into a business, which is probably
Right.
everybody's dream job.
Right, exactly.
Depending, no matter what it is, it's modeling or whatever,
Yeah,
taking what you love and turning it into a job.
yeah, and I saw a need in the industry for 6 mm terrain, especially modern Middle Eastern stuff, which was what I wanted to play at the time. There's a couple of companies that make World War II European scenery and things like that, but I started off with the Middle Eastern style structures, and from there it just grew. I just kept making more buildings. I got into different scales because people would write me and say, I want that building, but I want it in 15 mm. So I, started doing some stuff like that. So I stayed out there for a year building this business, working on it at night in my room, and coming home on the weekends and actually making the stuff and filling orders. So for that first year, it was kind of weird because if you placed an order on Monday, it would ship the next Monday because
It wouldn't get produced until that weekend.
until the weekend, yeah. So after I was out there for a year, got everything straightened out with them, and their shop was up and running good, I said, I'm going to come home and just do this full time. And 6 years later, well, 7 total, but 6 years since I came back and went full time, I've been doing this full time ever since.
Wow.
I've invested in a lot of machinery, but immediately bought a very expensive laser cutter, and it probably paid for itself in a year. And I've bought some other pieces of machinery since then, and branched out into other areas, and it's just been doing what I love doing. I go to work every day and laugh.
Yeah, you and I talk, and I think I'm probably the 4th or 5th person on the planet, at least, to see the new stuff that you put out, and I get to see some of the stuff that comes from the printer, your 3D printer, and
Right.
it's neat to see, walking into this not knowing anything about it, and now I've learned so much to see how these things are built, and I've been in your casting rooms and seeing how you do all of this stuff, and it's really neat. It's a little bit of jealousy, because maybe this isn't my dream job, but it's fun to do. It's fun to watch you, do the thing that you do and come up with these new ideas and new products that you put up on your page.
I think he wants to be on the show.
Oslo guy.
Yeah, it's truly a dream job, and I appreciate it, and I'm so happy that I'm able to do this, and I thank my customers every single chance I get, because if it wasn't for them, I'd be punching a time clock for somebody else, doing what everybody else does, but instead I get to come here and play all day. Sometimes it feels like a real job, but most of the time it does feel like I'm doing what I would normally do if I didn't have to.
Right.
If I won the lottery today, I'd still do this. I'd hire you to do most of the dirty work, but I'd still come in the office every day.
Right.
If I wasn't traveling the south of France. But
That would be, that's definitely, I think, the envy of a lot of people, that you're doing what you love. And you got into the 6mm, obviously, for your own gaming system and,
Right.
and all of that. But I think for me, as I look at, your 6mm, I obviously purchased some of your stuff and I use some of your stuff, exclusively your buildings. But like the differences, and I put my tanks up against your 6mm stuff, and I don't quite understand the scaling differences. Like how does the scaling work? It doesn't make. Because I measure and like they're not 6mm, and
Right.
this isn't 15mm.
okay.
It's not.
Yeah, I see
It's
what-
very confusing being new to the gaming scene and
see where you're
not
going.
understanding.
And this is a pet peeve of mine too. I rant about this from time to time. For some reason in the gaming world, they've decided that when you make a figure, the measurement from the bottom of his shoes to his eyes is that number we're talking about, 15mm. If you measure this right now, hopefully if they've done their job right, it should be 15mm. In the micro armor scale, a little figure, is 6mm from the bottom of his shoes to his eyes. And that works for figures, to a point. Is the figure German? Is he American?
Right.
Is he Chinese? Is he Russian? These ethnicities
Right.
have different heights. So if they're all 15 millimeter, they're all the same height, so it gets a little ridiculous. So there's a problem there. But for whatever reason, that's the scale system that was decided on for wargaming, and only for wargaming. There's no other form of model building, model railroading, RC airplanes, plastic model building, any of these other modeling aspects where they use that millimeter scale, because it doesn't work.
You'd think, and for me being a layman, you'd think that you'd want it to be a scale of the original.
It has to be. It has to be. If you're making vehicles or structures or anything other than humans, you need a ratio. You need 1/100th scale, 1/285th scale, or 1/300th scale, or whatever. I can't build a building to 6 millimeter scale. That's not a scale.
Right.
It's a measurement of a human of average male size, whatever that means.
Whatever that means.
So we've come up with equivalents, and for 6 millimeter, the equivalence is either 1/285th scale or 1/300th scale. There's some argument there because most of your British companies or European companies prefer 1/300th, not sure why. Your American companies, GHQ and CNC and Gamecraft Miniatures, we use 1/285th scale.
Okay.
But the difference there is so minor in this scale. I can put an M1 tank next to another M1 tank that's 300th scale and 285th scale. You may or may not even see a difference.
Okay.
It's very minor. But yeah, when we get into 15 millimeter, we have to decide on a number. And people have different opinions. Some people say it's 1/110th. Some people say it's 1/100th. I use 1/100th. It's simple.
Okay.
I may be off by a little, compared to other manufacturers. 20 millimeter comes out to be about 1/72nd or 1/76th. Again, there's some argument there because we're converting from the height of a human to a real scale. So it gets difficult, but there are equivalents. And yeah, I have a real problem with it. I hate it. Because, like I said, I can't build a building
Right.
to 6 millimeter scale. I can build it to 1/285th, I can build it to 300th, I can build it to any number you want, as long as it's not followed by MM.
It's a scale, right?
Yeah, as long as it's a
It's a
scale,
scale,
a
yeah.
ratio. And for people that don't understand what the ratios mean, 1/285th means anything that's 285 inches in real life is 1 inch in a model. Or in the case, the opposite is true. This model is approximately 1 inch long. In real life, it's approximately 285 inches long. That's how the
So
scale.
the real tank is
The real
roughly
tank.
285 inches.
Yeah.
Okay.
Or whatever this is, times 285.
Right.
And theoretically, if they've done their math right, this 15 millimeter tank there is whatever it is, 1.5 inches long, times 100 would be
Okay.
the full scale. So that's how the scales work. I don't like them, and I have to force myself to say 6 millimeter all the time because all my life these miniatures have been 1/285th scale in my head.
Is there a reason why? I mean, I know that it sounds, but I mean, is it like a, let's do it this way so everybody else has to match what we're doing?
You'd have to ask our great-great-grandparents.
Okay.
Whoever started doing this, whoever started doing lead miniatures way back in the day, toy soldiers, they were measured in millimeters.
Okay.
And it just stuck. And I don't like it.
It's better to use scaling system. It's easier mathematically.
It's much easier. It's possible mathematically.
Right. It is possible. It's impossible.
It's impossible the other way.
Right.
But and again,
I mean, doorways in one country may be smaller or larger,
yes,
depending on the invading force, right? And so
yes.
that's where the scale helps. I mean,
I always tell this story. When I first started Gamecraft Miniatures, I told you I started with the 6 millimeter stuff. I had a friend who was working for me at the time in the aerospace company. He was a gamer. He's a 20 millimeter gamer. And he had some buildings that he'd made in 20 millimeter. He was an awesome model maker. Hand carved everything. And I said, hey dude, if you make some molds of those buildings, I can sell them and I'll kick you back, some of the money.
right.
So we did that. And to this day, we still do that. On my site, in the 20 millimeter category, anything with a BMC in the part number is masters from, models from his masters.
Gotcha.
So I still sell them today. But they were all 20 millimeter, and he had 20 millimeter figures, and he scaled everything, he did everything right. And I had a customer early on send me a nasty email saying, your buildings are the wrong size. And I said, what do you mean they're the wrong size? He goes, if I put my figure next to your building, his head is taller than the doorway. And I said, send me a picture, I don't believe you. He sent me a picture, and I told him put a scale next to his
Right.
guy so I could actually see how tall he was. Well, first of all, the guy was way too big. Some miniatures manufacturers just make their guys bigger.
Right. I remember hearing that the Flames of War guys used to have really big heads.
Probably, yeah.
So that was one of the things that.
And some of the players do too.
Yes.
So the guy first of all was too tall. He wasn't made 20 millimeter. He was made either that or he was just like a very, very tall German or something. I don't know. But he was a very tall guy. And the base on this, a 15 millimeter figure, the base is fairly thin. 20 millimeter figures, they get a little thicker. And the base was probably around a 1/16 of an inch, which is another millimeter and a half.
Right.
On top of that, he had based his figure on a 1/8 inch base. Okay, a 1/8 inch base in 20 millimeter is like standing on a milk crate.
Right.
So here we had a guy standing on a milk crate
Can't get in the door.
with a 2x4 on top of that, and then he's too tall to start with, and he couldn't get in the door. And I said, no, dude, my door is right.
My door's right. Your figure's wrong.
Your dude's wrong. So that was just a little argument I had with that guy, and eventually straightened him out. But it was kind of funny because I was like, I'm a professional model maker. I've been one my whole life. This guy Bruce, who made the
That
Master,
building, yeah.
he's a professional model maker. He's been one his whole life, longer than me, I think, actually. And he's traveled to Europe and taken pictures and measured things.
So he's working off a scale.
He's
Yes.
working off of pictures and dimensions, and he made a door, and that door exists somewhere in real life. And I don't care how tall your guy is, the door is right.
Right.
So yeah, we nipped that in the bud right away.
So I guess you do have kind of an issue with.
I do with the figure scales. I hate them, but I have to go with what the system is. So
Yeah.
there you go. I forget what the question was, but that's the answer.
No, I got it 6 millimeters from foot to eyeball.
Bottom of the feet to eyeball. Now I don't know if that's bare feet or boots,
Yeah.
and if the boots have heels.
And it's this millimeter at the hold on.
Yeah, it'd be fun to measure that and actually
Yeah, we will. Let's
see how close they
let's
are.
check it out
We'll
and see
do
how
that
close
when
it
we're
is.
done here. See what they did. So, real quick, one thing I wanted to cover before we're getting pretty close to the wrap up here. I want to cover a couple of things I've been working on in the workshop. I said in episode number 0 that this isn't going to be a commercial for my company. I'm not going to promote my products. However, the things I make for my company, I am customer number 1. I'm the first guy to build it, to paint it, to use it. So I'm going to tell you what I got from Gamecraft Miniatures lately. And I'll post up some pictures in here because you guys probably can't see these very well. These are some new Middle Eastern buildings that I just came up with. They're solid resin, and this is really getting back to my roots in a way. These are very much like the very first buildings that I came out with, I started this company with. They're a lot more detailed, they're a little more intricate. I'm using some new techniques lately to make them, and I'm just really happy with them. They're really cool looking buildings. This one here, I don't know if you guys can see this or not. I'll put up a picture. This one here has a curved wall on it. And this is actually, I saw a picture of a building in Syria.
Oh,
I go online sometimes and just Google Syria, Afghanistan, Iraq, Baghdad, just to look at buildings.
get some inspiration.
Because I'm a fucking dork. It's what I do. And that's where I get my ideas. And I just saw this building in Syria and thought, I'm going to model this because I can now. And I think it's pretty unique because I don't think I've ever seen too many buildings with curved walls and curved windows in this scale.
Right.
It's kind of an unusual thing to do.
I like the archway in that building. Was that actually in the picture?
This one here?
Yeah.
Actually, I couldn't see that side. I saw it from this angle, so I'm just guessing what the archway
It looks cool.
Yeah, it's a pretty cool looking thing. So these are 3 new buildings that I've done, and they're on the site. This is not an advertisement, but they're available to anybody that wants them. I want them, so I've got them.
Yeah, I'm sorry I wore my Gamecraft miniatures.
Yeah, it's too bad.
I wanted to wear a hat and I wore this one.
You guys want a free show? There's going to be a little bit of advertising. The other thing, this is brand new. These went live on the site moments before we started this video. And this, I'll bring it right up in there and see if you can see it. This is a little boat. It's called, I'm going to get this name right, it's the Riverine Command Boat. That's what the U.S. Navy calls it. The rest of the world calls it a CB-90 fast attack craft. It's used by Sweden, Greece, Mexico, America, Malaysia, and coming soon to Germany. And this is a metal miniature, pewter. It's all one piece, one casting, you just paint it up. Pretty cool little boat, and it's in
Very cool boat.
in 6mm. And I'll post a picture so you can really see. I did a camouflage job on it and everything. I think it looks pretty decent. There's 3 hard points on here where you can mount machine guns. 2 on the sides and 1 on top of the what do they call it on a boat? Cabin, whatever it is, the wheelhouse.
There you go.
That square boxy thing up there with windows. So there's 3 places to mount machine guns. I haven't included any machine guns in the kit for 2 reasons. One, they're really, really difficult to cast and they don't always come out well, so I didn't want to provide a product that was subpar. And all the different countries have different kinds of machine guns, so it's going to be I would have to put 5 or 6 different machine guns in there to accommodate whatever country you're going to use this for. So I figure most micro armor gamers have a little box on their workbench full of spare parts and machine guns and shit, so you can just put whatever you want on there. So there's that. That's kind of a cool looking little thing, and it just went online. The other thing, this is not something that's available to the public, this is just something I made. Try this again. This is an Argentinian medium tank. And the cool thing about this is that it's the chassis of a German Marder APC, and it's a turret from a German Leopard 1A4. And the Argentinians, for whatever reason, decided those are 2 great tastes that taste great together and put them together. So I actually had to go out and buy a pack of Marders and a pack of Leopards and throw away half of each and then put them together to make these. And I had to move the turret mounting hole back a little bit and center it. But that's a cool little vehicle that I just made for my own collection.
So that's for Alan.
That's for me. That's my imaginary nation that I've created for doing goofy stuff like this is using those vehicles. They're calling them something different, but that's actually something, just a little aside here. If you go onto the GHQ Micro Armor forums, there's a lot of people on there that have started just recently doing something really, really dorky and geeky and fun. They've created their own imaginary nation. They call it imagination, imaginations,
Nice.
with a hyphen, so that they can field whatever vehicles they want and
They
paint
use
them.
what they like. And
Use what they like, paint them the way they like, and I kind of jumped on the bandwagon with that and created my own little imaginary nation and said they use these vehicles, they paint them this way, and I created a map, and I just completely dorked out and went all in. So that's what I'm going to use those for. I'm not going to field an Argentinian force, but my own nation of Malakistan is using TAM tanks. And if you're Greek, right now you're laughing at the name Malakistan. If you're not, never mind. Don't worry about it. It's an inside joke. So I think I'm done.
yeah,
Are you done?
I think I'm done. I mean, I'm learned so much today. It's
Okay.
it's nice.
And we got through this whole thing in one take, I believe. So either it's going to suck or it's going to be good.
Oh, it doesn't matter. We
Doesn't
did it for
matter.
us.
We had fun. Okay, so we'll do this again. We're not on any regular schedule. I'm not promising weekly or bi-weekly or anything crazy like that. We're just going to do it whenever. And
Hopefully, I'll be invited back.
I'm pretty sure he will. You guys let me know. Let me know what you think of this clown over here. if he should come back or not, or if I should change my phone number and move. All right, guys. Thanks for watching, and have fun and keep on gaming.
Wow, I am considerably larger than you are.
I'm a very tiny person.